Let's go, Jake.
Little sparring session. Let's get it.
Good shot. Good up.
So Jake Paul put out some new sparring footage on his Instagram a few weeks ago, and other than some obnoxious marketing tactics,
I better hurry y'all asses up, it ain't gonna be no good seats left.
I better hurry y'all asses up, it ain't gonna be no good seats left. I better hurry y'all asses up, it ain't gonna be no good seats left.
and y'all better get Jake some better sparring partners, or else Woodley's gonna clean his clock.
Wow, Koscheck is swing. Oh! That's it. Now that's it. Tyron Woodley knocks out Josh Koscheck. Oh my goodness.
Just kidding, guys. But in all seriousness, are there any potential boxing strategies Jake's trying to employ here in this footage to get the edge on Woodley? What does this footage tell us about Jake's sparring partner during this camp, as well as how sharp he's looking leading into the biggest challenge of his career? Well, let's dive right into this and find out. Real quick, this is Kiwi MMA, and if you're new here and enjoy combat sports breakdowns, especially on more unconventional fighters or matchups like YouTube boxers, then please subscribe to the channel below, and let me know in the comments what you think of this sparring footage. Is Jake looking sharp, or is this just all hype? And without further ado, let's get to the footage. So the session starts out with Jake's opponent looking like he's trying to get into the Philly shell stance here. Right, he's got his right guard up to defend from jabs, and also his left shoulders jutted out so he can lean away and shoulder roll punches. His opponent looks like he anticipated Jake's jab and was trying to parry it, but Jake is able to bypass the parry with his own jab, which lands clean. Now Jake's partner tries to guard up again, and it almost looks like Jake's follow-up right hand lands partially on his opponent's guard. He also leans slightly back on the shot, but Jake is still able to land the right cross clean. This is a good little 1-2 combo from Jake, and he's going to land this combo again in this exact same scenario when his opponent tries to come forward with this Philly shell style. We cut to the next segment where it's hard to tell if his opponent was in the middle of a combination or was just walking forward with no defense, but Jake tags him here with a nice check left hook. If you notice, after his opponent gets tagged, he kind of wings out his left hand, almost like he's about to go for a left hook or overhand after getting tagged. Unfortunately, the segment ends here, and it would have been nice to have seen how Jake might have reacted to his opponent taking the shot but continuing to pressure him against the ropes. Flash forward to the next section, and Jake's partner is guarding up here with both his gloves. I just want to note, his body is totally exposed here, just keep that in mind for later. So his partner leans to his left while guarding up towards Jake. I'm not quite sure why he does this, but maybe he's trying to bait or move closer to Jake to get Jake to throw something so he can counter him. Or his partner could just be looking to see Jake's tendencies and reactions when he guards up. And Jake's response to this is he throws a rear uppercut that, to me, looks like he kind of reached for it a little bit, but his partner is turning right into him, so you can't really blame him for throwing it. He lands the uppercut, which is actually pretty light compared to the one he's going to land later in this sparring session. He then follows up the uppercut by throwing a left hook to the head, and it looks like Jake just barely misses his left hook as his opponent ducks down under it at the last second. Now we move to the next segment where, again, Jake is up against the ropes and his opponent, again, is totally guarded up and just crouching in front of Jake. Now, as opposed to the last clip where Jake was sort of reaching for the uppercut, here his opponent's momentum slightly carries him forward perfectly into Jake's rear uppercut. I don't know what his opponent was trying to do before this, but Jake was able to time this shot really well. So the uppercut flusters his sparring partner, who drops his right guard down, allowing Jake to land a nice left hook right on the ear. And Jake tries to double down with another left hook, but this one seems to just barely graze along the back of his opponent's head. But Jake goes again to the right uppercut, which lands clean, and his opponent finally decides to stop guarding up and standing in front of Jake, so he stands more upright and goes back into a Philly shell type stance. Now, Jake's partner is trying to roll this left hook from Jake either off his shoulder or just turn with the punch so it doesn't land as cleanly as it would otherwise, but unfortunately we don't get to see what happened. We'll talk more on this later, but as good as Jake's combinations looked in this segment, his sparring partner was basically acting like a human punching bag here. Now we flash to this next scene where it looks like Jake lands a nice right hand to the body. Now remember when I said earlier that his opponent, when he's guarded up like this, leaves his body totally exposed. So instead of going for the uppercut through the guard down the middle, Jake looks to punish his opponent to the body instead. Now this wasn't the hardest read to make, but it's good to see Jake switch from the uppercut to the body shot where he can do more effective damage. Now it looks like he tries to go for a left hook to the body as he exits away, and I can't quite tell if it lands or not, but he throws it and then is able to shuffle back to reset. So it's good to see Jake work on his body shots more, and hopefully this is something he can develop for future fights. Now here we see almost an identical sequence to the first clip where Jake's opponent is basically walking forward nonchalantly. His partner's in the Philly shell stance, but once again he seems incapable of parrying Jake's jab, which lands clean. His opponent looks primed to shoulder roll Jake's follow-up cross as his shoulder is flared out and in position, but he's not able to make the contact with Jake's right hand, and once again the 1-2 lands clean. Now this last part is interesting though because I've talked about how Jake tends to overextend on his power shots from time to time. So look at Jake here and how he overextends. He's got no guard up, he's pretty much in a defenseless position. It's real subtle here, but after his opponent eats the shot, he looks to punish Jake for overextending by slipping in a tight uppercut. Watch how his partner's right arm comes forward right after Jake makes contact with the right cross. And I'd be willing to bet his opponent landed that shot immediately after the clip ended. But given how Jake's face looked at the end of the sparring session, it doesn't look like that punch did much damage or that he took much damage in general. And that's pretty much all we get to see here. It looks like his team only wanted to point out some of the nice shots Jake was able to land during the session, and we didn't even really get to see Jake's opponent throw a punch or see whether Jake's defense had improved or not. But what can we say definitively about Jake from this sparring session, or his opponent for that matter? Well, his shots still look as good as ever. Still very snappy and powerful, and his right cross in particular looked good, and he really seemed to sit down on this punch a lot more. He did reach a little bit for that rear uppercut in the beginning, but he seemed to get his partner's timing down for that shot more as the later segment showed. Of course, it helps when your partner is just kind of sitting in front of you and not doing anything. That left hook uppercut combo is a good one for him up against the ropes, but as I mentioned, it kind of helps when your opponent is just kind of standing in front of you like a punching bag. It was also really good to see Jake rip to the body more because we know he had great success in doing this against Askren, getting Ben to worry about the shots down low and then coming up top with the right overhand. And this is just classic Mike Tyson advice. You go to the body first, which then opens up opportunities for the head later. And Jake has great power and speed, so body shots are something he needs to be utilizing a lot here. And if he can keep doing this, this could really give him a better chance of knocking out his opponents. Or at the very least doing some serious damage to some MMA fighter's liver. Now, defensively, his hands are still pretty low, and he does overextend for sure when he throws his power hand, and it's unlikely he's dipping away on the same side he threw the punch to get away from the follow-up attack, and he's definitely not keeping up much of a guard after throwing shots, at least from this footage. And again, I have no doubt Jake can hurt Woodley, but if he overextends, if he throws out a power hand, throwing caution to the wind, similar to Josh Koscheck or the way Darren Till did against Woodley, Jake's going to be in for a world of trouble. And there's one more thing we need to talk about here, and that's from what little footage we have, what can we say about Jake's sparring partner? Now, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming this guy is probably being brought in to emulate Woodley in his style. He seems pretty heavily muscled himself and powerful, but he also seems to employ, from what I can tell, is a more defensive Philly shell style of an approach. So you'd think Jake's opponent would be backed up against the ropes in these exchanges, but actually Jake is the one who's typically with his back against the ropes in these exchanges. Now this is interesting because typically Woodley is the more defensive fighter, except for the Luque fight of course, but most of Woodley's career he's scaling the cage and looking for a counter. So it makes me wonder, are they expecting Woodley to take a more pressuring approach? Who knows, honestly. And the last thing is, we didn't get a great gauge of his partner's skills from any of these exchanges. Like, as I said, all we could really tell from his partner was that he was trying to utilize a Philly shell type stance and defense, but he wasn't very successful in parrying Jake's jab or shoulder rolling the right hand. And the few times when his partner did pressure Jake, I was getting shades of the Ben Askren sparring footage, but the opposite situation. Instead of Ben's partner, who was just stuck against the ropes in a fetal position, just letting Ben do whatever he wanted, Jake's partner had him against the ropes, but looked totally lost in space and didn't know what he was doing. Right, you'd think Jake's partner would be in the more advantageous position to open up on his offense, but instead he just kind of stood in front of Jake with a high guard and let Jake tee off on him. He didn't even try to move back with any footwork to reset the action. I don't know what his partner was thinking, honestly. It almost reminded me of Nate Robinson, but again, any more redeemable footage for this guy was likely spliced from the footage in an effort to hype Jake up, so no disrespect to the guy. But that's a brief analysis of this footage from Jake, and definitely some interesting exchanges. Regardless of how biased the video is towards Jake, from what we saw, he's looking about what we'd expect to see. Powerful, fast, but still with some glaring defensive holds that need fixing up. I'm sure this isn't Jake's only sparring partner, and no disrespect to the guy, he's probably getting paid good money to be here and be a part of Jake's team. If I was in his position, I could understand being seen as Jake's punching bag in an Instagram video, as long as I'm getting paid. But I just hope this isn't the best they're feeding Jake, because Tyron Woodley is no joke. And even at almost 40 and on a 4-loss streak, Woodley still possesses dangerous power and speed to match Jake's. Maybe they think Woodley is going to come in with a Philly shell style and approach from his training with Mayweather. Ultimately, we don't know what Woodley's boxing style will look like until fight night. But I know for a fact Woodley's going to look a hell of a lot better than Jake's opponent in this session. Anyways, this is Kiwi MMA, and thank you guys so much for watching. And if you guys want to see my boxing breakdown of Tyron Woodley to learn about some of his tendencies before this big fight against Jake, I'll leave a link to that below. And again, this is Kiwi MMA, over and out.